This game is an outrage. Give me Virtua Fighter 6 or give me death. Alright, I don't know what was going on with the Tekken Bros when Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown was released, but can we say it was a little much?
And I'm like, no wonder your game is dying. Yeah, let's just go for nostalgia. So you 100 people who play Virtua Fighter can keep getting the same shit over and over. Yeah, that's an amazing plan.
It was a little over the top, especially for a franchise they don't play or care all that much about. And sure, they're all saying in the videos, you know, oh, I care so much about Virtua Fighter. I respect Virtua Fighter. But if all the Tekken players were so familiar with Virtua Fighter and its legacy in all the games specifically, why didn't they pick up on any of the awesome ideas and improvements in Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown instead of complaining about the compressed voice samples and sound effects? And so if I've learned one lesson from the release of Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown, it's the importance of a fighting game franchise to have a fleet of online pundits to defend it in the public space. Otherwise, that conversation is going to be dominated by people who are the most popular, loudest voices, even if they're not giving the game a fair shake. And so in today's video, it is my goal to discuss, a little bit late, but the merits and the great ideas that were brought to us in Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown, because I am a big fan of this game. It is probably my favorite fighting game of all time at this point. It inherits a lot, obviously, from Virtua Fighter 5, and I think it is also a fantastic step in the right direction. So I just want to clarify that for people who saw Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown, were like kind of interested, and then they just see wave after wave of video about how it's crap, how it's a joke, how it's garbage, and must assume, oh, okay, it must absolutely suck. Especially since, Virtua Fighter 5 has a very long history, has a lot of releases, and so if you're not kind of familiar with the series, you might kind of get lost. So let me be your guide, let me be your Saint Bernard through this release. So let's begin by talking about what Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown even is, because people were saying that incorrectly in all these reaction videos. Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown is not a remaster. It is not a port. It is actually a remake. And unlike other remakes that I won't harp on about, rather than remaking the game by putting in some elements of the original game and then adding in a bunch of extra fanfiction crap, what Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown does is meticulously remake Virtua Fighter 5 Final Showdown in a brand new engine. And the accuracy in which this game has been remade is impressive. I don't think I've ever seen such an accurate remake, and this is the type of remake I like to see. A remake that is an outright improvement, for the most part, over the original. I have Virtua Fighter 5 Final Showdown, I have Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown, and you know what? I have to give the edge to Ultimate Showdown. And I'm going to explain why that is in today's review. So let's start off by talking about what Ultimate Showdown brings to the table. So it brings over basically everything from Virtua Fighter 5 Final Showdown, except some customized costumes and except a special sparring mode, which was really cool. So it's sad that we did not get that special sparring mode from Final Showdown. It is kind of the main reason to still play Final Showdown. But other than that, everything else from Final Showdown is in Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown. But the thing that Ultimate Showdown brings to the table are fantastic graphics that I think are perfectly comparable to Tekken 7, Tekken Bros. Calm down. I think they are perfectly comparable to Tekken 7. And then these great new added hit spark animations that I think Virtua Fighter 5 has been needing for a very long time. I like to see those added. And a sleek and very forward-thinking UI. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of talking about this game, there is one topic, the elephant in the room, that I think needs to be addressed that I fundamentally disagree with the Tekken Bros and with the internet at large, which is the idea that they should have come out with Virtua Fighter 6 instead of coming out with Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown. To me, I think this step was the much smarter, more realistic step. Because let's be realistic here. Virtua Fighter is not Tekken. Sure, Tekken had a bit of a slump there during the Tekken Tag 2 era, But other than that, Tekken has always been a very popular and successful franchise that continuously is being worked on and released. So going from Tekken Tag 2 to Tekken Revolution to Tekken 7, that was all in the cycle of the game development. Sega, on the other hand, the Virtua Fighter series just ended, basically. Virtua Fighter 5 came out over a decade ago, and from that point, Sega has not been really working on it or updating it or have not been actively creating fighting games. And so in my opinion, it's not a good idea to take such a refined and highly respected game franchise as Virtua Fighter and just go for it and just make Virtua Fighter 6 and be like, here you go, here's Virtua Fighter 6. The dev team, a lot of them have aged up, a lot of them have left, we've got a new team here, we don't know what we're doing really, here's Virtua Fighter 6. How do you think that's going to go? Versus what I think what they did with Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown, which was they got the team together and they brought over Virtua Fighter 5 and they're kind of using it as a training ground. Not only to see if people are still interested in Virtua Fighter, which looks like it's been pretty successful, but also a training ground for the development team to become more intimately familiar with Virtua Fighter as a system, moving that code over. It's not like they just plugged and played it into the new engine. I doubt that. And in that process, what the Virtua Fighter team has accomplished is really awesome, where they've got the whole game, they've got the whole system in a brand new engine. And I know that right now it's stuck on Sony consoles because I believe Sony kind of funded this game. But this engine, the Yakuza engine, that comes out on PC all the time. It comes out on all these different consoles. So it's going to be this great home for Virtua Fighter 6. Now Sega is in the position to more realistically make Virtua Fighter 6. I'm actually quite optimistic that we will see a Virtua Fighter 6. I'm just feeling the vibes. And I also think Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown turned out so well that there's really no reason not to continue. It's just a great step forward. So let's look at what it adds. The first thing that it adds that I'm very relieved about are the graphics, the visuals. I love the aesthetic of Virtua Fighter, and not just like the graphical quality, but the actual visual presentation of this series. It has that Sega kind of cozy charm to it, where it's classy and refined, but it's also playful as well. It's just this really special vibe that when you fire up Virtua Fighter, you just feel it. Namco and Tekken have that real like Hot Topic sort of vibe to it, which I don't mind. I mean, this shirt is literally from Hot Topic. I don't mind, but it's just distinctively different than what you get in Virtua Fighter. And so in some of the critique and feedback I've seen from Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown, they're saying, well, why don't they add in like slow-mos and add in supers? That's not what Virtua Fighter is about. If Virtua Fighter 6 comes out and they have slow-mos and supers and rage and all that kind of shit they have in Tekken, big turnoff, big time. And I don't think it will. I think Virtua Fighter has always prided itself on being sort of the final pure 3D fighter. And if you think about it, it is. Look what's happened with Tekken. Tekken's bringing in all these elements from Street Fighter and 2D games, meters, comeback factor. Tekken's crossed that river a long time ago. Even Dead or Alive, I'm a big fan of Dead or Alive, but Dead or Alive 6, you know, it has the critical blows, it's got meters, so Dead or Alive crossed that bridge as well. Soul Calibur, oh god. Soul Calibur I think is in the worst shape of all of them. Soul Calibur 6 is just a nightmare. Virtua Fighter's it. Virtua Fighter's the final sort of 3D fighter left that has that pure health bar and frames. And let's not forget, Virtua Fighter, in terms of the core combat fighting system, is just beautiful. It moves me to tears. I don't get offended very easily. I am not someone who gets offended about things. But I was watching some of these Tekken players' reactions and discussions of Virtua Fighter 5, and not just like Main Man going angry. Not just him. I've saw other ones too. And they're kind of like, oh, Virtua Fighter's stiff. It's like, you guys don't understand this game series at all. Virtua Fighter is not stiff. You just do not know how to play it. And so what I'm getting at here is a huge selling point of Virtua Fighter is its core combat system. And for the longest time, the reason why I didn't play Virtua Fighter, even though I liked it the best of all the series, is just because it wasn't popular. And I wanted to play what is popular. But over the past year or two, I've kind of just made my peace and said, you know what, I'll play a niche fighting game that not many people pay attention to because it is worth it at this point. don't get hung up on what's the most popular game to play, because it will never be the most popular game to play. This is what annoys me about all these conversations about Virtua Fighter 6, is that everyone acts like when Virtua Fighter 6 comes out, we're all gonna play Virtua Fighter 6, we're all gonna swap over, we're just waiting, we're just sitting here and waiting. That is not going to happen. Virtua Fighter is just too fundamental and too 3D based to pull in a bunch of Street Fighter players and a bunch of 2D anime players and even Tekken players for long periods of time. Because the thing about Virtua Fighter is that it doesn't have any crutches. It doesn't have any big sticks you can swing around and kind of get around the fundamentals of the gameplay. Like in Tekken, for example, as a Mishima player, you learn to throw electrics and you learn to backdash cancel. You can kind of get around the fundamentals of the 3D combat, like sidestepping, sidewalking, frame data, and all that kind of stuff. You can get around that for a really long time because Tekken is full of really big sticks you can swing around, and Mishimas have that, but a lot of characters have that sort of thing. Whereas in Virtua Fighter, you need to immediately, like when you first start playing, start thinking about frame data, input buffering, sidestepping, sidestep canceling, crouch dashing, Abari. Like, you have to think about all of these bigger fighting game concepts and techniques, like right when you start playing, which I think is super cool. And that's what I love about Virtua Fighter, is it's just the core combat system pushes you to think mechanically right away. So Virtua Fighter, the core fighting system, you can't make a review without talking about it. So now let's talk about the positives of Ultimate Showdown, and then I'll get to my critiques. So beginning with the positives, a simple one, but one that people forget to mention, is the price point of this game. If you want to get into Virtua Fighter, this is a great game, not only because of everything it brings to the table and the quality, but also price point. I really like a fighting game being sold at the $30 price point or lower, not just for me as a player personally, but also to help bring new players into the game, to help recommend the game to people. How many times do you have a fighting game that you really like, that you want to convince your friends to buy, and they look at the price point and it's $60? This actually happened to me, where on the Shmup server, everyone was like, oh, you got to get Melty Blood. Melty Blood's coming out. We're going to play Melty Blood. I dropped $60 on Melty Blood and was like, I shouldn't have spent that much money on Melty Blood. That was too much. So I think having the game at a $30 price point makes jumping in less of a risk, especially because it's on sale all the time. So even if you don't want to pay $30 for it, just keep an eye on it because it goes on sale quite frequently. Okay, so the big addition, the big mama of Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown, besides obviously the graphical updates, is the online net play, the netcode. And I have a funny observation when it comes to fighting game players' attitudes on netcode. What I've observed, the attitude fighting game players have on netcode is rollback netcode is required once my series has it. And so once the series I like has rollback netcode, then all the other fighting game series have to have that. Because I remember when Tekken 7 came out, we all were saying, oh, it wouldn't be nice if it had like true rollback netcode, but it didn't. Did all the Tekken players say, oh, forget it, don't buy Tekken 7, don't do it because it doesn't have rollback netcode?
I'm taking a cigarette break. I hate this game online. Ugh! Playing this game online is so bad for your health. I can feel it in my neck. I can feel it in my neck. Oh my god.
Remember when Guilty Gear Xrd came out and it had quite netcode? Did all the Guilty Gear players say, you know what, forget it, we're not playing Guilty Gear? And I do understand that in recent years, rollback netcode is becoming more and more of a standard. And so if this release was Virtua Fighter 6, it absolutely must have that rollback netcode in order to be viable and taken seriously. But in the case of Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown, it came out in that weird intermediary period. And also Sega are a bit behind the times. They're getting back in the game, they're getting their feet wet. So I view it much more as a contemporary to Tekken 7. And when it comes to the net play, it is basically the strongest
delay-based
net play you're going to run into, where they're using Amazon servers, and it does play really, really well for
delay-based
netcode. It isn't hot garbage. I would say it's about even or better than Tekken 7's netcode. And also something about Virtua Fighter that I don't think people understand, and this isn't me saying there shouldn't be rollback in Virtua Fighter 6, there should be, But Virtua Fighter, of all the fighting game series, is probably the most resilient when it comes to online net play because of the input buffer system of the game. So Virtua Fighter is quite unique in the way it works with its input buffer, because basically there's this rolling 10 or 11 frame input buffer for everything in Virtua Fighter all the time. And the reason why that input buffer exists is because the frame data of Virtua Fighter is incredibly tight. It is so precise. And so when you first start playing Virtua Fighter, it feels like impossible. Okay, I have to punish this move that has 1 frame of disadvantage. I've got 1 frame of advantage. How do I do that? Well, you're able to do that by using the buffer. So you start buffering moves together so they come out exactly on the frame that you need them to, which is really great for just overall the feel of the game. But it also makes it really great for online net play because you don't drop things as much because you have that frame buffer. So it's not like playing Street Fighter 4 and you're trying to hit 1 frame links on delay-based netcode. No. The input buffer really helps smooth out the delay, and then on top of that, the netcode is pretty solid. So I would say overall, the netcode is much better than people give it credit for. It isn't top tier, it isn't the best because it's delay based, and so I'm very excited for hopefully when we see Virtua Fighter 6, I can absolutely see them building and improving upon this netcode and bringing rollback. But in the meantime, it is far from being unplayable, and it is far from being like a disaster or a hot mess. I would say it's a slightly better online experience to Tekken 7 when it comes to the netcode. But on top of that, what I think they did a fantastic job with this game is the online interface, the UI. So the way it works is you open up the menu of the game and everything is just right there. And I think it's really laid out fantastically. And then on top of that, they have this sort of replay window in the right corner, and it's so cool. I really hope they keep this feature for Virtua Fighter 6, because there's many times where you pop open the game and you just see, you know, top tier players fighting each other, and you just kind of sit and watch, and I don't know, it gives the game a real cozy vibe. And I don't know, just something about having the sort of real-time TV of people playing matches. I stop and watch it all the time. You actually can learn things and study things. It's also great for getting match data. Like if you want a bunch of Virtua Fighter matches, you can just open up Virtua Fighter, screen record, and just go about your day and come back and you have a bunch of matches to watch. So I really like this feature a lot. And then when it comes to getting matches, I actually enjoy playing ranked in Virtua Fighter. And the way it works is you go into ranking, you kind of set everything up beforehand like a lot of other fighting games. But then the area that you hang out where it's searching for matches is a full-blown practice mode. And I know other games have started to do this, like you can turn this on in Dead or Alive, you can turn this on in Street Fighter 6. But I like how it's just the default. This is how online matchmaking ranked works. I'm a big fan of that. And then another feature that is really cool is the tournament mode of the game. Now, other fighting games have tournament modes, and I have used them precisely 0 times in all my years playing fighting games. The thing about Virtua Fighter's tournament mode that I think is really good and that I think is forward-thinking is that it actually programs the tournament into the game. That is really clever, especially because, you know, Virtua Fighter doesn't have a massive player base, but the game itself is helping facilitate the tournament where it has the date of the next tournament, it does it every single week, then it has the times. So no matter where you are in the world, you don't need to go on Twitter, you don't need to go on Discord, you don't need to go to all these little external sources that no one checks on and cares about. You can just say, well, I'm gonna play in a Virtua Fighter 5 tournament this Sunday, and the game sets that up for you. You just have to be there. So that was another really awesome addition to the game that no one cared about. And then when it comes to single player content, I will say that Virtua Fighter is slim on that, but it isn't non-existent. So it has an arcade mode. The arcade mode of Virtua Fighter is really solid because the AI in Virtua Fighter is really good. I ended up though topping it out because I do play it on the very hardest difficulty now and I can get through it. I really wish though that Virtua Fighter had a versus computer option. It doesn't have this, and apparently no Virtua Fighter has had this for some reason. So that's a big oversight, and obviously a simple feature they could have added. And also, the special sparring mode of Final Showdown, I really wish they kept special sparring for Ultimate Showdown, because it is the best single player mode of Final Showdown, and it being missing, even though you have character customization and everything, it being missing I think is a big oversight. So in terms of single player content, the game is light in that area, there's no doubt about it. Though the training mode is really robust and the tutorial modes are really good. My number one recommendation is that the second you start the game, go to tutorial mode and do their move tutorials, because the thing about Virtua Fighter that's really cool is like the move sets of the game are very deep and very interconnected, and the more you play the character you start to realize, oh my god, these moves link together in these different ways, and a lot of characters have multiple stances and the stances link together in different ways, and like different inputs and different stances do different things, and it's crazy the amount of stuff you can do. So to really get familiar with your character, the move tutorials are great for that. And then it has a systems tutorial that's also really good. It's not as legendary as Virtua Fighter 4's system tutorial, but it is still very good, and it teaches you advanced techniques like Fuzzy Garden and everything like that. So it has strong tutorial system, and it does have character customization, which is a lot of fun. It is unfortunate that it is missing some stuff from Final Showdown, but the nice thing about it is that a lot of it is still in there and it's baked into the game, whereas in Final Showdown you have to buy that. I don't know if people understand that, but if you buy Final Showdown, like if you want to customize Vanessa, you have to like buy her stuff as DLC. And so Final Showdown ends up being a full-priced game by the time you buy all the special costumes and everything. Then there are special DLC costumes that are exclusive to Ultimate Showdown. Yakuza, which is kind of meh. Tekken, which is kind of meh. And the Retro, which is kind of meh. They're all kind of meh based on your character. Some characters have like cool DLC, like Pi being Lily is pretty cool. And some of the Yakuza costumes are really cool. But poor Vanessa, her Yakuza costume looks stupid. And Master Raven is an abomination. So yeah, she doesn't really benefit from those DLCs too much. But overall, you can still make your character look pretty cool. And then speaking of features, one that people often overlook is the soundtrack option, because it's just in the music settings. But if you go into the music settings of the game, it has all of the Virtua Fighter soundtracks, all of them, which is really cool because Virtua Fighter, in my opinion, has the best soundtracks as a fighting game series, and you just have them all there and you can just swap between them. You want to listen to some Virtua Fighter 4 Evo, you want to listen to Virtua Fighter 2, Virtua Fighter 3, Virtua Fighter 5 also has a bitchin' soundtrack. That's something Tekken players, I mean, come on. Tekken, after Tekken 5, you know, Tekken 6, Tekken Tag 2, Tekken 7, ugh, you know, their soundtracks fell off big time. And then in terms of the sound effects and voice samples that people are complaining about so much, I personally don't get it all that much, because I've always felt like newer fighting games have shittier sound effects and shittier voice samples, and you go back and you play like Tekken 4, Tekken 3, or Tekken 5. I prefer that era of sound effects and voice samples to what we're getting now, so.
Round 1, fight. Round 2, fight.
That I think is a very aesthetic preference,
Chicken.
Especially because these days game developers are intentionally compressing voice samples and intentionally compressing sound effects to get that nice crunchy sound again. So maybe Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown is actually a bit ahead of the time in this. And then the final topic I want to talk about are the added hit sparks, which I think are a great move in the right direction. One of the things that has bothered me about Virtua Fighter over the years is the lack of hit sparks and the lack of sort of visual feedback when you hit enemies. I think Virtua Fighter leaned a little bit too much into the simulation side of things when it came to the presentation. I think the animations are beautiful. I like the sound effects a lot, but it didn't have as much of a visual reward when you hit things in the older Virtua Fighter games, because there was not much hit sparks going on. There was a little bit, but there wasn't very much. It's very noticeable change in Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown. I think it's a good one. I think not only in terms of visual presentation and making the game visually more engaging, but also in terms of communication of what's going on. Like, you get different hit spark colors based off what types of hit it is. I like Virtua Fighter leaning a little bit more into being a game with this. And the ironic thing is, you would think this is the one thing Tekken players would all sit down and nod their heads and be like, there you go. There's not a whole lot of lessons that I would want Virtua Fighter to take from Tekken, but one of them that I did want it to learn from Tekken is hit sparks. Like, Tekken is great. This is one of my favorite things about Tekken, are the hit sparks. How Tekken has great visual feedback when you hit things. And so it is kind of funny and ironic that the Tekken players were complaining so much about sound effects and the animations not changing, even though Virtua Fighter 5, Final Showdown, and Ultimate Showdown do have new animations. No one just bothered to check. There are actually new moves and animations in Final Showdown and in Ultimate Showdown. Anyway, the one thing you think they would all be like, okay, but we got to give it credit here, were the added hit sparks. So I'm a big fan of these. You know I love it in shmups. You know I love it in beat 'em ups. That visual feedback, it's not just about looking pretty, it's also giving the player rewards. And I think it's a great sign for what Virtua Fighter 6 is going to be if Virtua Fighter 6 comes out anytime soon. And so my final conclusions on Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown. Well, one, it is my favorite fighting game just outright, so there is that. And then on top of that, I think it is a nice step in the right direction. Is it the magic bullet? Is it going to bring Virtua Fighter into esports and, in Saudi Arabia there'll be multi-million-dollar tournaments or whatever for it? No. But I think it has been a great step forward for the series, and it is going to serve as a foundation for Virtua Fighter 6. If we see a Virtua Fighter 6 anytime soon, I am quite convinced it will be built off of the engine of Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown, and it will be continuing the concepts that are being explored in Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown, which are really emphasizing the multiplayer, really emphasizing the online matchmaking. We're gonna get rollback. I can feel it in my bones. We're gonna get rollback. It's gonna be one of the best online fighting games if we get a Virtua Fighter 6. In the meantime, I really recommend, if you're interested in Virtua Fighter, if you like Virtua Fighter, put aside this whole hang-up about the series is not going to be Tekken in terms of popularity. It just isn't. It's not going to be Street Fighter in terms of popularity. If you are attracted to fighting games based off of their popularity, which is valid, I'm not saying that's not valid, but if that's what you're attracted to, I don't think you're ever going to get into Virtua Fighter. That's why I actually picked up Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown, because I made this video about how frustrated I was sitting around waiting for Virtua Fighter to get popular, and I realized that's not going to happen. I need to put that aside and just enjoy the game for what it has to offer in terms of the player base, and people talk about it. But ever since I've made that step forward, it's been a lot of fun. And you can find matches. You have to be a little bit more patient with it. Let's be honest. You're not going to get matches just all day, every day. But I will say, the way it works is what I'm finding is the higher skill you get at Virtua Fighter, the more matches you'll be finding, because it's like a funnel. So your first week or two with the game is going to be a little bit rough when it comes to matchmaking, because you're a complete beginner, and there are other complete beginners. But once you just keep studying the game, practicing the game, playing rank, you'll get your rank higher and higher. And as you get your rank higher and higher, you'll start to run closer to the large crowd of people who play who tend to be higher ranked. You're like kind of thrown into it. But Virtua Fighter, let's be honest, I don't think really the Virtua Fighter player base is all that difficult to get into. I mean, I had like a 22 match win streak, and you can get a lot better at the game literally by studying it, practicing against high-level CPUs, studying it again, studying the frame data, analyzing the system, and then testing the concepts out in online matches, and then going back. That formula still works, even though there's not thousands and thousands of players active all the time. That formula can still happen. It's a bummer there's no PC port. It's a bummer there's no special sparring. It's a bummer that there's no rollback netcode. The game is not perfect. I'm not trying to sugarcoat it and saying it's perfect, but I like it so much, and it compels me so much. It's hard for me not to kind of gush about it. And I think it was a much better game and release than it was given credit for. So I definitely recommend it wholeheartedly. No doubt about it. I like it a lot more than Tekken 7. So there's that, if that means anything to anyone. Thanks so much. Adios, everyone.
So thank you to the $5 patrons, 100, Accepting Panda, Admiral Coconut, Anhold, Alexander Pfeiffer, Anthony A, Arcade Hell, Arrow Viper, Auto-Named, Beam Pit, Bo, Ben, Beto Dames, Bog Hog, Chase Palumbo, Chris Yusufovich, Christopher Freeze, Chronic Burnout 3, Clara Cliff, Climby Coyote, Coast, Colorboy, Cooksand666, Cook Some Soup, Des Audio, Dan Chi, Darren Griffin, Dave Hansen, David Crespo, Delta Tango 6, Dick Jones, Dingo, Disco Stas Leia, DJ420, Praise It, Dr. Bosky, Elias Alonso, Evan Serafet, FCK, F Deluxe, Friskin, Frames Per Human, Francisco, Full Set, Gameboy Guru, Geese Machine, GPM, Hausu, Jake Ryan, JLab, JB RPG, Gene Hans, John Kelly, George Sand, K-Horse, K2, Contain, Praise the Boys, Low Casting, Meshba, Malaise, Mars Bar, Matt O'Leary, Maz, Megadeth 859, Minung, Munro, Nathaniel Davis, Neon Dagger Games, Okla Kugels, Pedro Perez, Psycho Blizzard, Queen Charlene, Raul, Real Skeen, Retro Schmupper, Riff Mason, Rolf015, Scanline City, Seesaw FW, Shazzy, Shmup Junkie, Sarah Pong, Spiders STG, Steve Fiction, Street Magic, Super Funk, SW1335, Tamzarian, Takero Mucho, Taze, The Boot Rex, The Dirty Screech, The N1, The Old Bensta, Toho Rizardi, TRM, Sugumo, 2YU, Twilight EX, Unicoi Roots, Ursula, Ushi Mushi, Vic Viper, Beautiful, Wabby Legs, Yosef, Zachary Patton, and Zeal. Thanks so much.